Well, hello everybody and welcome to Jeff's Baking Blog. Today I'm going to be making some Easter bread. This is going to be a cranberry, raisin and cashew bread, and I'm going to make one amount of dough but two small loaves, and the loaf shape will be the bloomer shape. I got this idea from some bread that I bought in Tesco supermarket. It was a cranberry, raisin and almond bloomer, and I thought it was very, very nice, and I thought, well, I could probably make something very similar to that and do it for Easter, adding just a little bit of orange zest and a little bit of allspice to give it that slightly let's say hot cross bun element to it as well. So the ingredients are, and remember this is going to be for two loaves, which are going to be about 10 inches by 5 inches, quite small, about 600 grams they will weigh. And I have 500 grams of bread flour, that's 4 cups of bread flour. I have 75 grams, which is 3/8 of a cup of caster sugar. Then I have 100 grams of raisins or sultanas or golden raisins, whichever you want to use. That 100 grams is 3/4 of a cup. And I have 100 grams of dried cranberries, softened cranberries they are, and that's 3/4 of a cup. I have 50 grams, which is half a cup, of cashews, which I have just broken in half. I have 2 medium eggs, which would be large in the USA, 2 teaspoons of salt. I have 10 grams, which is about 1.5 packets of instant yeast. I have 1 teaspoon of allspice. I have the zest from 1 orange. The allspice and the zest of the orange is just going to give it that little bit of flavour into the bread dough, as opposed to the things which we're mixing in. Then I have 40 grams, which is a scant 3 tablespoons of almost melted butter. Some's melted, some's very soft. And I have 250 millilitres, which is 1 cup of lukewarm milk. So the first thing to do is to mix some of the dry ingredients together. And I'm going to do it in my stand mixer, simply because it's easier for kneading dough in a stand mixer. So I'm going to put the flour in and the sugar, and at this stage I'm also going to add in the zest and the allspice, and then I'm just going to use a whisk to mix those round. It's just that I want to make sure that I get the zest broken up and mixed into the flour really at this stage. So then I'm going to put the salt on one side of the dough. I'm just going to cover that up. And then I'm going to put the yeast on the other side. And then into the middle I'm going to pour the eggs and about half of the milk. Doesn't matter if it's a little bit over half. And the butter. And I'm simply then going to mix this with my dough hook until it all starts to mix together, and I'm going to knead it until it's a nice firm but tacky dough. And as I'm doing that, I'm going to dribble in more of the milk, but I only want to add enough milk so that the dough forms and it becomes tacky. If you put too much milk in, it doesn't matter, you can always add a little bit more flour, but what you want to do is knead it until you've got a nice stiff, firm dough which is tacky to the touch. Okay, so the dough has kneaded now for about 5 minutes, and I've used all but about 2 tablespoons of the milk, and it's tacky still, but it looks good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add in the raisins and the cranberries and the cashews. And I'm just going to mix that around to get that incorporated, and then I'm going to do it on the counter with a little bit of flour, just so that I can make sure that the fruit and the nuts are evenly spread. Okay, so I've mixed that dough, and I'm going to pull it off the dough hook, and I'm going to put it onto the counter and just finish it off so that I can make sure that the fruit and nuts are evenly distributed. And then I'm simply going to turn that over to get a bit of flour all over it. Then I can give it a bit of a knead. And this is just to ensure that I've got the fruit worked fairly evenly into the dough, and that doesn't look too bad. So then the next thing I'm going to do is to put that into a greased bowl and cover it with plastic wrap and leave it to rise in a warm place for a couple of hours, or at least until it's doubled in size. Depending on the temperature of the room, it may take up to about 2 hours. So I will leave that to double in size, and then I'll come back and we'll go on to the next step, which will be to divide the dough, shape the loaves and leave them to prove again. The dough has now doubled in size as you can see, and if I press it, it doesn't spring fully back. So what I'm going to do is tip it out onto the surface, like that. I'm just going to press it down to knock the air out of it, and then I'm actually going to divide it into 2, because I'm making 2 smaller loaves, and they should be about 575 grams for each piece. So I'll just put that in there like that. So that's one portion. This is the second portion, and what I'm going to do is shape this into a log, And it's going to be, I want it about 8 inches by 4 inches if I can get it like that, and then it will increase in size as it rests. And if you've got any fruit that's on the top, if you can press it in a little bit, that's good. If you can't, just take it off, because it might burn. So that piece, for instance, I'm going to poke that back in underneath, and I'll take that one out as well, because it's not. And with the loaf like that, so that's about 8 inches long, and I'm just flattening it down a little bit like that, and I'm going to put that onto a baking tray, and I'm going to cover that loosely with plastic wrap, and I'll do the same with the other one, and allow them to double in size again. That's going to take an hour to an hour and a half. And while that's happening, I'm going to preheat my oven to 200 Celsius, that's 180 Celsius with a fan, 400 Fahrenheit. So that will then be ready to bake them. But I'll come back when they've proved again, because we need to slit them, and I'll show you how we slit them to be the traditional bloomer type shape. And then we'll put them in the oven and bake them. So my dough has now doubled again in size, and I have one of the loaves here. So what I'm going to do, I have my oven preheating at 200 Celsius, 180 Celsius with a fan, 400 Fahrenheit, and I have a very sharp knife, and I'm simply going to score this loaf with 4 or 5 diagonal lines going about ½ an inch deep. Just like that. And then I'm going to put that into the oven with the other loaf, and I'm going to bake it for between 30 and 40 minutes. And that's until it's gone a nice brown colour. Now these will go quite a dark brown because of the milk and the butter in them. That's normal. But if you think they're browning too much, you can just cover them lightly with some aluminium foil, and that will stop the browning from going too far. So I'll bake them until they sound hollow when I tap the underside of them, and I'll also test them with my thermometer, the internal temperature, which I want to reach about 87 Celsius, which is about 185, 190 Fahrenheit. You can get them a little bit hotter and it will make them slightly more crusty, but that will be fine for me. So once they've reached that temperature, I'm going to take them out of the oven, then I'll come back and show you the results. So I baked our loaves for 35 minutes and I tested them with a thermometer, and they'd reached the right temperature, so I knew that they were cooked inside. So then I took them out of the oven and I brushed them with a little bit of melted butter straight away. I don't think that's absolutely necessary, but I did it. And this is what it looks like now that I've sliced one of the loaves just a little bit. And they baked quite well. So I'll have a taste without any butter or anything. You know, it tastes very, very good. And just that little bit of orange, I'm just going to taste the dough by itself. Just that little bit of orange and allspice gives it a flavour which gives you a hint of the hot cross bun that you would get at Easter. That's very good. I'm going to enjoy a couple of slices of that shortly with some butter and a cup of tea. So this is quite easy to make, and if you halve the recipe you'll just have one loaf, which would, you know, be ideal for some people. You could even make a larger loaf just by doing the recipe and creating one large bloomer, which would actually weigh more than £2 in weight, if you want something as big as that. So that's going to be it for this recipe. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, please give me the thumbs up below the video and click to subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the top right hand corner of the screen there will be an eye that you can click on, which will take you to this recipe, and I'll put a link for it below the video as well. Then I'll be back with another recipe in the very near future. So until then, happy baking.